Alright, welcome back to my channel, Wisps of Wisdom. I'm super excited to be doing another interview, and this next one is a topic a lot of you have been looking forward to and waiting for a while. This topic is going to be about dating. So I'm really excited about my guest this time. It's my aunt. Her name is Jolene. Most people know her as Jo. And I know her as Aunt Jo. So a couple times in the interview I slipped up and called her Aunt Jo just because that's what I'm so used to calling her. But she has so much great advice and insight, and I'm really excited for you to hear her story. She's so good at telling it, and this is only part 1 of 2, so don't go away. Come back again next month and listen to the next part of her story, because she is so good at telling it, and she really does have a really great story with a lot of really good advice. Hi Aunt Jo, and welcome to this episode of Wisps of Wisdom. I'm super excited to have you here. And
be there.
Yeah, how about you go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit?
Okay.
Maybe say a little bit about who you're married to, the stage of life you're in.
I'm in middle age. I have a husband named Ben Martin, and I have 4 children.
Nice.
And they are at a great stage, ages 3 to 12 in a few days. So, they're all potty trained, and it's still a good stage right now, but it's still very busy.
Yeah. Awesome. So let's just go right into, since this episode is about dating, let's just go right into you sharing about how you and Ben met and how that all played out with setting standards and making sure that you kept your relationship pure, but also still having fun.
Oh yeah, it's possible.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. We got to know each other in high school, mostly just acquaintances, and he was at a different high school than I was, but our schools played sports against each other. And so I learned who he was, what his name was. He is good looking. He was good looking. But it wasn't the kind of thing that I had a crush on him per se. Then 3 years after high school, we went on a canoe trip together. A hodgepodge of young adults went, and a mutual friend of ours, of Ben and mine, invited me to come along, and she and Ben had collaborated in making this trip happen. He was getting the guys and she was getting the girls, and so most of us knew each other, but anyway. So that was the weekend that I got to know him, and I had a fierce crush.
That's great.
But I don't think he was interested. So I went away from that weekend saying, I was going to South Carolina to the girls' camp, and he was going to Woodcrest in Ephrata for summer camp. And so we had camp in common, so we talked about that a lot over the weekend, but we were going to be in worlds apart, sort of. And so I just tucked it in my back pocket. If I ever had the opportunity, I would not miss it.
Yeah. So was it pretty depressing to feel like, you had this mad crush on him at this time when you got together, and then you were obviously going separate directions and he didn't have any interest? Was it pretty depressing for that to happen? Or was it just sort of like, oh, well, it's obviously not going to work out then?
It was, depressing maybe isn't quite the right word. Disappointing, but at the same time, I'm going for a 2-year commitment to South Carolina to throw myself into these girls' lives, and so it was probably better for me not to be dating as I went there. So disappointing, but not completely disappointed, you know.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So I went to South Carolina a month after this canoe trip, and then 5 years later, approximately, I came to Pennsylvania for a wedding, my cousin's wedding. I came back to Pennsylvania before the 5 years was up. I was back and forth.
Right.
He was the videographer. and so neither of us expected to see each other there. And he says the bells went off, and he just was kind of like, God said, see, I can have you. He had been processing, felt like God was calling him to find a wife, and he made a list of 5 young ladies, because he wasn't like, okay, when God tells me I can get married, it's going to be Joe.
Yeah. Right.
So, and he had put me on the bottom of the list because I was in South Carolina, and he was not interested in long distance dating. But God kind of spoke to him at that wedding and was just kind of like, see, I can have her at the same place you are, you know. And and he just felt like, so he seemed a little extra interested in talking to me that day, but you can't go there, you know. You can't get too emotionally wrapped up in that. And so I went back to South Carolina, and maybe 3 months later, he sent me an email just encouraging me about what I'm doing. He had read books that talked about the philosophy of the therapeutic camping, and he just wanted to encourage me and tell me I was doing a great job, and he thinks it's a great ministry. And I was so blessed and thankful that I wanted to respond and thank him. And the interesting thing is that email sat in my inbox for like a month till he got a response.
So he was probably really second guessing this whole thing.
He felt like it was not going to happen. Like, you know, apparently I wasn't interested or something. Well, it turns out I was on a trip, I think, maybe a canoe trip, a several week canoe trip, and my computer was broke down. I was having trouble with it.
It's a perfect storm, right?
Oh, exactly. So he gets my email, and so then we kind of started emailing back and forth, but he didn't really let on that he had other intentions. And so I was going to be going on vacation, so I wanted to let him know that I was coming to Pennsylvania on vacation, but I didn't want to be like, hey, are you trying to get ready for it? I mean, are you trying to set me up for a date here? So I decided, all right, well, I'll just tack it on to the end of an email, you know. I'm so excited. I'm going to have this vacation, and I'm coming to Pennsylvania for the weekend of Memorial Day for my sister's graduation. And so he had the information he needed. He knew when, and he knew I was coming to Pennsylvania. And so his next email to me was, he didn't know if I was dating or not, and the email was the only contact information he had for me. And he wasn't going to ask our mutual friend for my phone number. Right. he didn't want anybody to know.
That's good.
So he actually said, well, I don't know if you're dating or not, but if you're not dating, I would be interested in maybe getting together for a date while you're up here, maybe canoe or kayak. And we both really love to canoe, and so
nice.
That was that ended up being our first date that we canoed. But anyway, so I just cried when I got that email.
Are you serious?
It was happy tears.
Yeah, of course, emotional.
I'm getting that chance, and I'm not gonna miss it.
Yeah.
So we made arrangements for him to call me, and when he called, almost one of the first things he said is, "I knew you were baiting me." He knew I was throwing out bait to see if he was gonna ask me for a date, you know. But he took it.
Right, exactly. I would be offended except for the fact that you took it.
I'm sorry, I couldn't be more
tactful.
Yeah. Sorry, I couldn't hide that a little better, but I did my best. So we had our first date that Memorial Day weekend.
Mm-hmm.
It worked out best for us to have our first date, because we wanted it to be the canoeing date.
Mm-hmm.
The day before I left to go back to South Carolina, I was I think I was here for 4 days or something.
Okay.
And so we ended up having like 3 or 4 pre-dates because we didn't want them to be our official first date, because we wanted our official first date to be canoeing.
Right.
But anyway, I remember getting in the car after he picked me up, the first pre-date, and being so nervous. All those butterflies in your chest. And I get in. He gets back in the car because he opened the door for me.
Oh no.
Right from the start.
Nice.
And he gets in the car, and I'm like, I'm so nervous. And he's like, there's nothing to be nervous about.
That's great. That's totally him. That was totally bad. Just so even.
Shows you the difference between us. But so this is an important part of the story, that we were long distance dating. I was in South Carolina, he was in Pennsylvania, and I was working. When we were dating, I was out of the group, but I was working, 14-hour days, 14-hour days. So we would, was back when you would have free phone service, cell phone service after 9 o'clock at night. And so he would call me after 9, and we would talk like once a week, and we would email each other, It kind of built up, but we would email each other once a day. It probably started out emailing once a week or something, I don't remember. So when we were together, we called it crash dating, because we would be together for a weekend or a week.
Right.
Every day, or almost every day. And then
not see each other for a long time.
And we would go be apart. And we tended to see each other once a month or once every 2 months.
Okay.
I think every 2 months was about the longest. So that, when we get to talking about standards and stuff, that's it was not that we were spending time together every weekend. So that kind of affected when we set our standards and that kind of thing. But anyway, so on our first pre-date, we went to Harrisburg, watched on IMAX, and walked around the city island.
Okay.
With the romantic lights. Anyway, and then we sat down, and he told me right then and there that he just wants me to know some things right up front. It was very awkward. And he says maybe that was not quite the right timing, but I think he wanted to be clear that wherever this relationship goes, these are some standards that he has that he wanted me to know right up front. And I guess if I wasn't okay with it, then we might as well not have any more dates. I don't know. But basically he said that he's not going to kiss until his wedding day. And he is not going to say the words "I love you" until he's engaged.
Okay.
And so, so that felt really awkward on the first date, but at the same time, it was sort of the easiest time to say it, maybe, you know. And it was nice because then wasn't ever like, why isn't he kissing me, or, which I would not expect him to kiss me on the first date, but
Right.
or why isn't he saying he loves me? I knew this is his policy, this is his standard, you know. And it was a standard that I could live with, you know. So that was one of our standards. And that part of our standards was talked about right then. But then we started dating in the end of May, and then in November. So I think we had seen each other maybe 2 times in there, I'm not sure. In November we decided that it was time to get some standards nailed down. So it was a hands-off relationship until then, and then we decided that, if I remember right, it was 15 years ago, that's something I forgot to say. I'm married 15 years in October. And we decided that he would write down his standards, what he wanted the standards to be, and I would write down what I wanted the standards to be. And then when we were together, sharing with each other and deciding what they would look like, combining them to make them. And it was interesting, they pretty much, I don't remember exactly how it was, but I remember that they pretty much were the same. And so it was basically, we could hold hands, we could give side hugs, and we could, he could put his arm around my shoulders when we were sitting. And we weren't going to say I love you until we were engaged, if we got engaged, and no kissing till the wedding day. So that was basically, I think that's what our standards were. And it was kind of neat to be a collaborative effort. We both had ownership in it, and it wasn't that I was just saying, well, fine, yeah, I'll do what you want, you know. Now, if one of us had been more conservative than the other, then I think the honoring thing would be to honor the one who feels like they need the standards to be more conservative, I say, or not as what's the word I'm looking for?
Involved. I don't know.
Yeah, like
the one that's
physical relationship is not there as much. So I think that that's important as you start dating and you make your standards, that you should have an idea of what you want your standards to be, and it's probably going to evolve. The more information you get, the more experience you have, the more you see other people, other couples, and all that, you may evolve. You may say, well, I'm gonna, you know, I want to at least be kissed, you know, and then maybe you'll hear a story and you'll say, well, maybe that shouldn't be the case, or whatever, you know, but I think it's good for each of us to kind of have an idea of what we want our standards to be, and then compare, and then have our boyfriend decide for himself before he hears ours, maybe, so that it's so that you both can have ownership. And I think that that's helpful then in it's not as easy for one to overstep the line continually, you know, and push the standard.
And I feel like that's actually a really good reflection then of someone's character, to be able to, if someone had said, I don't really have any boundaries, I guess I can try to follow yours, that I guess would stick up some red flags for me, to be like, he doesn't have any boundaries.
how faithful is he going to
Right.
be in a marriage relationship then?
Right.
You know, in a dating relationship, how
Right.
faithful would he be if he doesn't have any boundaries for himself?
Right.
So maybe hearing his before you really voice yours would then also sort of gauge where he's at in his desire for purity.
Right. Right. Or at least saying, let's both figure out what we personally want and then bring it together and find out what that compromise is, you know. Yeah, I think. And if a guy hasn't thought about it just because he just hasn't thought about it, you know, that doesn't make him so stupid.
Right.
If he's willing to say, well, hey, that's a good idea. Let me think that through a little bit, you know. I probably do have some standards that I'm thinking of, but I just don't have it like, haven't put words on it, so to speak, you know, or that kind of thing. So.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow, I feel like that was really good conversation. I learned so much from just her sharing her story, and I'm sure you did as well. Don't forget, this is only part 1 of 2, so stick around for next month's episode. She's going to be sharing her engagement story, and then at the end we're also going to have a Q&A where she answers the questions that you sent in about dating. And I also want to put in that you probably noticed we didn't include what her best piece of advice is that she received or that she would give this time. That's in part 2. So stick around for that, and know that this past episode has been really good, and the next one is going to be just as good. And maybe even more helpful, since she's going to be addressing the questions that you asked.